Continuing our conversation, Mr. Bayo to me, as you can see, since you joined us again, thank you for coming in, and compliments of the season to you.
Thank you.
Looking through 2018, particularly as it has to do with budget presentation, I know that they talked about the challenge with funding the 2019 budget, but looking at 2018, in terms of how we've implemented that particular budget, how did it stand out for you?
Thank you very much. I think the budgeting cycle in Nigeria, we seem to be going round and round in circles. We go through the routine and the tradition of presenting a budget. A budget is a statement of intent. What a budget will be judged by is the degree to which that appropriation act has been implemented. So Chamberlain, if we take a look at the 2018 budget, it was passed, I think, sometime in June of this year. So it's been running for give or take 6 months. Capital expenditure was meant to be 2.8 trillion naira. So far, only 820 has been spent, which is really just under 30%. Why have we not hit 50% of proposed capital expenditure? Because our revenues, the revenue targets, have not been met. We're barely 50% of revenue targets. So you can't spend what you don't have. So unfortunately, we seem to be going through this recurring decimal of coming up with budget estimates that are overly ambitious, and therefore the achievement of those targets, becomes a bit of a struggle. Why do we have a production benchmark of 2.3 million barrels a day? When was the last time Nigeria as a nation achieved that production target?
So impossibilities in the budget.
Absolutely. Why do we have a budget benchmark? The 2018 budget, fortunately, was based on a benchmark of $51 per barrel.
But before you proceed, the DG budget, I think I remember him saying that, well, yes, they have the GNL, and some of the other ones are going to come on stream. And so when that comes on stream, they're expected that will raise the revenue profile. So to that extent, they justified it. Does that pass for you?
I totally disagree. My fundamental objection is that the revenue targets are overly ambitious. So break down the assumptions. So the principal assumption, because Chamberlain, 70% of our revenues, right, as a nation, and 90% odd of our foreign exchange inflows come from the sale of one singular product. So how difficult is it to make an assumption around that product, right? So we have a situation where production targets have never been met. At best, we've done 1.95, which means that we have a 350,000 barrel a day shortfall. Right, at $60 or at $51 a barrel, that is a significant revenue shortfall. We have revenue targets for taxation, for customs and excise, and other independent revenues. How much of that has government achieved? We have targets for privatization of state-owned enterprises. $1 billion was supposed to come from there. How much have we realized thus far? So those are the realities.
But in the presentation of this 2019 budget, if you look at those assumptions, were we being ambitious again? Because they did also factor in the fact that we've got the revenue challenge.
Well, again, for people like myself, it is a source of great frustration that we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Budget benchmark for last year, 2018, which we're still running, $51 a barrel. Estimated benchmark for 2019, which Mr. President presented to the House National Assembly on the 19th of this month, was at $60 a barrel, right? And we see where oil prices are. We see the drivers of oil prices. So I would expect that we should, at the very minimum, retain the benchmark of last year at $51. So that if we get more than that, then by all means, it's additional revenue. But don't set yourself up from day one with unrealistic budget revenue assumptions.
Let's take a look at the economy. Talking about economic diversification, are we pursuing with the right speed diversifying our economy?
There is a lot of rhetoric And this is not restricted to current administration. I will say that in the last 20 odd years, as a matter of fact, if you go back into the 70s, we've always been talking about the need to diversify the Nigerian economy. But it's essentially lip service. If you measure with facts and figures, you will see that we're still quite a distance away. Our economy is still an oil economy. Oil took us into recession. Oil brought us out of recession. Any direction oil moves, we feel it. So yes, there is a plan. There is an economic recovery and growth plan which seeks to diversify the economy. But it is no different from any of the 5 or 6 or 7 other plans we've had since we became an independent nation. What is always and has always been missing is the faithfulness to implement. The plans are there. How to restructure Nigeria's economy, it is documented, well documented in a series of documents over the last 30, 40 odd years. What will we do differently this time, right? That is the question.
But what kind of lessons or encouragement or otherwise do we get from for instance, now they spoke about the GDP, the performance of the non-oil sector, and how the GDP has managed to hold its head above water in 2018, 1.5%. How do you think we managed to produce that number in the first place?
Well, Chamberlain, unless there is fidelity to an economic agenda, unless there is discipline to see through all of these policy initiatives, we will continue to take a step forward and another step backwards. Go back to the first quarter GDP numbers. We closed last year, Q4 was at 2.11%. We dropped to 1.8 at the end of first quarter. We dropped to 1.5 at the end of second quarter. Third quarter, thankfully, we inched up a little bit to 1.8. We're still below our target, our annual target. If you look at the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, if you look at the 2018 budget, we are still below GDP targets. And it is the reasons are very, very clear. Where the cost of running government is way too high. We're still spending 70% of our revenues on managing the infrastructure of government.